In the quietest moments of life, when the outside noise fades and we are left alone with ourselves, the question of true freedom begins to echo. For thousands of years, humanity has sought freedom, but most have looked for it outside, in power, in wealth, in conquest. Stoicism entered history as a reminder that freedom is not something seized from others, but mastery over one's own soul. When Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journals amid war and plague, he did not call for more conquests, but for people to turn inward, freeing themselves from the chains of fear and desire. In that stillness, freedom appeared, not loud, not in need of proof, but steady, like a small flame burning bright against the storm. True freedom, the Stoics taught, is not the ability to get whatever we want, but the strength to remain unshaken no matter what comes. People often mistake freedom for the ability to do as they please, but history has proven otherwise. Those who sat upon thrones, wielding power over nations, were often imprisoned by fear and doubt, never knowing peace. By contrast, Epictetus, a slave, lived freer than many kings. He taught that no one can control our thoughts or choices unless we allow it. Chains may bind the body, but the soul can remain open as the sky. True freedom lies in how we choose to respond, in the attitude we bring to life's events. When we release the need to control what is beyond our reach and focus on mastering ourselves, we cease to be victims of circumstance. We become our own guides, walking with dignity, even along the hardest paths. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, lived at the center of Rome's whirlwinds of power, where a single word from the emperor could lift a man to glory or cast him into ruin. Yet in his letters and essays, Seneca did not urge people to chase power or flee fate. Instead, he urged them to train their minds to become unassailable. For him, freedom was not escaping danger, but escaping the grip of ambition and fear. The one who can be content in the present, who places virtue above every temptation, remains free, even in exile, even at the edge of death. This is freedom of the soul, untouchable and incorruptible. It is like an underground river, flowing steadily beneath, untouched by the crashing storms above. Stoic freedom is not withdrawal from the world, but the ability to live within it without being broken. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor-philosopher, proved this with his life. He bore the crushing weight of empire, faced frontier wars, plagues, and political betrayal. Yet instead of letting these burdens erode him, he chose calmness as his response. In meditations, he continually reminded himself that all events are natural trials, and the only thing worth guarding is the purity of the soul. At the very peak of power, he found a quiet freedom in mastering his emotions and keeping compassion for his people. His life stands as proof that Stoic freedom does not require retreat into isolation. It can shine even in the heart of responsibility and turmoil. The freedom the Stoics pointed to is not a distant prize, but a daily practice. It begins with small things, learning patience in the face of insult, learning calmness in loss, learning clarity in success. In these everyday moments, we forge wings that lift us above the grip of circumstance. For whoever can keep a clear mind in small matters will also stand firm before great storms. The Stoics believed that freedom is not granted. It is earned, step by step, through practice and trial. Like an artisan hammering away to create a masterpiece, we must steadily shape our will to free ourselves from invisible chains. And when we look back, we discover that the path to true freedom was never far away. It was the journey of mastering our own soul, day by day. Stoic freedom lies in accepting that there are things beyond human control. When a storm strikes, the small boat cannot calm the waves. but the sailor can choose to hold the rudder steady, refusing to be swept into panic. In the same way, in life, we cannot prevent illness, death, or betrayal, but we can choose to face them with composure. The Stoics viewed every event as a natural part of existence. They did not waste their strength resisting fate, but instead used calmness to align with it. In that acceptance, they found a special kind of strength, the strength of a soul unbroken by circumstance. And once this peace is attained, one can pass through the storm while keeping the light of freedom shining in their eyes. Stoic freedom is also freedom from the chains of desire. People are often trapped in cycles of greed, wanting more, higher, faster, and these endless cravings become invisible shackles. The Stoics understood that wealth, status, and fame are fleeting, vanishing at any moment. If we tie our very existence to them, we will never escape fear and insecurity. But when we learn to see them as temporary tools, not as measures of our worth, we begin to remove each shackle. Seneca reminded us that wealth does not make a person noble, only virtue does. When we release ourselves from insatiable desire, we do not lose joy. On the contrary, we discover a simple, lasting serenity. This is the kind of freedom that no power can take away. Stoic freedom also comes from mastery over emotions, for emotions are often the strongest invisible bonds on the human spirit. A single insult can spark rage, a loss can drown us in grief, and even praise can intoxicate us with illusion. The Stoics did not deny emotions, but they trained themselves never to be led by them. They regarded anger, fear, and greed as passing clouds in the sky, not worthy of obscuring the soul. By keeping calm, we learn to respond with reason instead of reckless impulse. And this self-mastery opens the door to freedom, no longer puppets pulled by circumstance, but captains of our own lives, knowing where we are going and why we are living. True freedom, in the Stoic sense, also comes from living in harmony with nature and reason. People often cause themselves suffering by resisting the natural order, clinging to the illusion that they can control everything. The Stoic chooses another path. They align with nature, accept the cycle of birth, aging, illness, and death as inevitable, and find peace in fulfilling their role in the present. They believe each person has a place in the vast order of the universe, and our task is to live fully in that role, with virtue and responsibility. When we no longer waste energy fleeing from the unchangeable or demanding what lies beyond reach, we discover a strange lightness, the freedom of a soul no longer trapped in futile resistance, but flowing in harmony with life's current. Stoic freedom also begins with the wisdom to distinguish what we can change from what we must accept. Much of human suffering comes from expending energy on what is beyond control, weather, fate, the behavior of others. The Stoics remind us that true wisdom lies in directing effort wisely. We can train our will, our virtue, our attitude, but we cannot change the flow of the cosmos. Once we understand this boundary, disappointment no longer tears us apart. We live with focus, clarity, and strength. This becomes the foundation of inner freedom, a soul no longer dragged into useless battles, but fully devoted to what truly matters. And that conscious choice transforms life into a steady journey, unshaken even in the fiercest storms. The freedom that Stoicism points to is not only for the individual, but also opens a path toward a more harmonious and sustainable community. When each person learns to master themselves, society has fewer meaningless conflicts, fewer quarrels inflated by selfish egos. A community of Stoic-minded people would not be led by collective rage or by shallow displays of pride. Instead, they would use reason and virtue as their compass. Throughout history, the world has often descended into chaos simply because people forgot that true freedom is not gained by imposing on others, but by mastering oneself. And when individuals learn the art of silence, resilience, and resistance to temptation and fear, the shared freedom of the community grows stronger, forming the foundation of a more enduring civilization. In the search for freedom, the Stoics also emphasized awareness of death, a truth that most people spend their lives trying to avoid. They did not see death as an enemy, but as a natural part of existence. Only by accepting death can we truly know how to live. If we live in constant fear of loss, we are forever prisoners of insecurity. But when we understand that all life is finite, we begin to value each moment and use it meaningfully. Epictetus taught that each morning we should remind ourselves that this day might be our last, and that awareness will help us live more fully, more freely. Thus, Stoic freedom is not about fleeing death, but about facing and embracing it, living more courageously and peacefully as a result. Stoic freedom is also nourished by learning to detach from the noise of public opinion. From ancient times to today, the world has been full of praise, criticism, and gossip. If we let our minds be guided by them, we remain slaves to others. The Stoics taught that the words of others are fleeting echoes that cannot define our true worth. Inner freedom comes when we no longer need validation from the outside world, when we can stand firm in our own virtue and convictions. Then, praise does not make us arrogant, nor does criticism break us. We become like a mountain standing tall amid storms, not because of loud resistance, but because we have found stillness and strength within. That is true freedom, freedom from the invisible chains of public opinion. Stoic freedom also lies in mastering one's own time. People often waste life in delay, in trivial worries, or in chasing empty desires, only to realize too late that youth is gone and opportunities are lost. Seneca warned that life is not short, only that people squander it. The Stoic treats each day as a precious gift, refusing to drown in regret for the past or anxiety about the future, but focusing instead on the present. When we master how we use our time, we master life itself. Such freedom does not come from having more years than others, but from living deeply and fully in each moment. When the present is lived completely, we are released from the chains of regret and fear, free to walk our chosen path with confidence. Stoic freedom also shines through in facing loss with composure. No one escapes separation, failure, or the passing of loved ones. Most people are overwhelmed by such shocks and lose the strength to continue. But the Stoic learns to accept loss as a natural part of life's journey. They do not deny the pain, yet they do not let it enslave the soul. With mindful reflection, they find in loss an opportunity to grow, to cherish what remains, and to mature in humanity. Freedom here is not indifference, but the ability to feel sorrow without being destroyed by it. Once we no longer fear loss, we become stronger, because we have found firm ground in the soul, a place that nothing can ever break. Stoic freedom also comes from the ability to live simply, detaching ourselves from dependence on luxury and material excess. People often believe that the more wealth one has, the freer one becomes. But in reality, wealth often turns into a burden, making us fearful of loss and bound by attachment. The Stoic chooses the opposite path. They strip away unnecessary needs so the soul may feel lighter. They understand that true abundance is not found in hoarded treasures, but in the capacity to be content with simplicity. A humble meal enjoyed in peace is far more valuable than a grand feast filled with worry. When we are no longer enslaved by material possessions, we discover a deeper richness of the soul. This freedom is not a rejection of life, but a way of living within it actively, unbound by what is fleeting. Stoic freedom also arises from keeping the mind pure in the face of power's temptations. Power is often seen as the ultimate symbol of freedom, but in truth, it often becomes an invisible chain, forcing its holder to live in constant fear of losing it, always scheming to preserve their position. The Stoic does not reject responsibility, but neither do they treat power as the highest goal. Marcus Aurelius embodied this. As Emperor of Rome, he could have indulged in all glory, yet in his meditations, he reminded himself only to live justly and humbly. For him, virtue was greater than the throne, and true freedom was found in not letting power rule his soul. This lesson remains timeless. Only when we preserve integrity and inner independence can we live as truly free beings. Stoic freedom also lies in learning to flow with life's constant change. All things transform. Nothing lasts forever in its original form. People suffer when clinging to what has passed or fearing what has yet to come. The Stoics taught us to see change as the natural order of the universe. When a flower wilts, it is not a loss, but a transformation, making way for seeds to sprout. When a relationship ends, it is not finality, but an opportunity for growth. True freedom comes when we no longer resist change, but embrace it calmly. In this way, we are not trapped in regret or fear, but can live fully in the present. And in harmony with change, we discover that freedom is the ability to move with the current while still preserving the essence of who we are. Stoic freedom is also found in letting go of the need to control others. Much suffering arises from the desire to shape those around us according to our expectations. Yet the more we try, the more disappointment we face, because each person is a world of their own, guided by circumstances and choices unique to them. The Stoic understands that we cannot control the thoughts or actions of others. We can only control how we respond. By releasing the urge to dominate, we free ourselves from cycles of anger and frustration. Instead of forcing, the Stoic chooses empathy and compassion, knowing that true freedom comes from liberating the heart from the chains of possession and demand. In that space, relationships become more authentic, love and respect no longer clouded by control or imposition. Stoic freedom also manifests in remaining steady amid the turbulence of history. Human history has witnessed countless rises and falls, empires of great power turning to dust in an instant. Those who ground their freedom in external stability will never feel truly safe, for the world is always shifting. The Stoic anchors themselves in another foundation, an inner life trained in virtue and reason. They believe that even as societies collapse and destinies shift, character and wisdom remain unshakable fortresses. When we hold on to courage and composure, we cannot be swept away by the floods of history. This is enduring freedom, not dependent on dynasties or the world's fortunes, but a quiet light guiding each individual through life's storms. Stoic freedom is also expressed in the ability to keep the soul unshaken by comparison. People often imprison themselves in the cycle of looking upward only to feel inferior, or looking downward only to feel arrogant. Both directions bind us to needless emotions. The Stoic chooses instead to look inward, using inner progress as the measure rather than the gaze of others. When we stop comparing, we begin to live truly with our own nature and abilities. Freedom appears when we no longer need to prove our worth by surpassing someone else, but simply by living in accordance with virtue. It is liberation from imposed standards and the pressure of competition. Only when we free ourselves from the endless game of comparison can we walk calmly on our own path, savoring each step as a complete journey without needing validation from anyone. Stoic freedom is also found in the art of silence and listening. In a noisy world, where everyone seeks to speak louder to defend their views, the Stoic chooses to pause, observe, and listen deeply. They understand that many arguments only fuel hostility, while silence allows reason to lead the way. Silence is not weakness. It is a sign of inner strength, the power to restrain impulse and put clarity above ego. When we learn to listen more, we begin to see the true nature of things, to understand the hidden motives behind human actions, and from there, to make fair and wise decisions. That silence opens a special kind of freedom, freedom from the grip of anger and desire, leaving the soul calm and clear in every choice. Stoic freedom is also revealed in the ability to transform adversity into opportunity. Instead of complaining in hardship, the Stoic treats it as a forge for the will. Illness does not drive them to despair, but becomes a chance to practice patience. Failure does not crush them, but becomes a lesson in growth. In this way, they no longer fear trials, for trials are the environment where virtue is tempered. With this shift in perspective, adversity ceases to be a chain and becomes wings that lift us to freedom. This freedom is freedom from fear, from the victim's mindset, and freedom to choose progress even when the road is harsh. It is the realistic optimism that Stoicism offers, a way of seeing that keeps us proactive before fate, never defeated. Stoic freedom is also nourished through connection with nature itself. They believed that true peace is found only when we know ourselves as part of the vast universe, neither separate from nor above its laws. Gazing at the stars, listening to the wind and waves, the Stoic sees their own smallness, and in that humility, lets go of the illusion of control. That harmony brings a special freedom, freedom from the illusion of an inflated ego, allowing life to be lived more simply and fully. In the modern world, where people are increasingly pulled away from nature, discontent grows stronger. But if we relearn the Stoic lesson, taking time to connect with earth, sky, water, and wind, we will find our souls becoming lighter and calmer. And in this harmony, we realize that freedom is not escape, but living in rhythm with the universe itself. Stoic freedom also shows itself in choosing duty over desire. Many live their whole lives chasing after what they believe will bring happiness, money, status, admiration. Yet the more they chase, the more enslaved they become, for such joys are fragile and fleeting. The Stoic takes a different path. They find meaning in fulfilling their duty, whether as a parent, a citizen, or a soldier. When one lives for duty, one is no longer ruled by fleeting desires, but guided by reason and responsibility. This becomes the source of a deeper freedom, freedom from enslavement to appetite, and freedom to live a life of purpose. When duty becomes the compass, a person walks steadily, unmoved by illusion, and finds peace in every meaningful act. Stoic freedom also comes from the ability to keep the soul unmoved by the swings of fortune and misfortune. People often rejoice excessively when fortune smiles upon them, only to fall into despair when misfortune arrives, as though life were nothing but a pendulum between two extremes. The Stoic learns to stand steady at the center, receiving both good luck and bad with the same calm spirit. For they understand that such events are merely natural parts of life, not measures of one's worth. When we preserve that serenity, we are no longer puppets pulled by fate's strings, but conscious travelers on the path we choose. This is true freedom. freedom from dependence on what lies beyond control, and freedom to live with virtue as the only possession no one can ever take away. Stoic freedom also shines in humility toward one's own knowledge. People often believe that the more knowledge they acquire, the freer they become. Yet knowledge without awareness easily turns into arrogance, and arrogance is just another form of bondage. The Stoic treats knowledge as a tool for living well, not as proof of superiority. They remind us that what we know is only a grain of sand in the desert of the universe. That humility frees us from the illusion of omniscience. When we learn to keep learning, to listen openly, to admit mistakes and correct them, we live more lightly, no longer bound by the need to always be right. This is a deeper kind of freedom, the freedom to grow, to change, and to walk forward unshackled from the heavy burden of ego. Stoic freedom is also found in gratitude. Gratitude releases us from the obsession with what we lack and turns our attention toward what is already here. When people cherish each breath, each morning, each small bond of affection, they are no longer swept away by endless desire. The Stoics believed that true happiness is not in how much more we gain, but in realizing the value of what we already have. Gratitude enriches the soul, and in that abundance, we find freedom. Freedom from the false scarcity that greed invents. A grateful person no longer fears loss, for they have already lived fully in each moment. This is a simple yet powerful freedom, freeing us from ambition's chains and granting us peace in the present. Stoic freedom also appears in the ability to see life from the widest perspective, without being entangled in trivial details. When we lift our gaze to the horizon and recognize ourselves as but a small part of the vast universe, everyday worries begin to lose their weight. Petty arguments, material losses, or minor injustices can no longer overwhelm us, for we understand that all of it is fleeting within the endless flow of time. The Stoic trains this broader vision to keep their mind steady, untrapped by shallow emotions. From the perspective of eternity, we discover a rare kind of freedom. Freedom from narrow anxieties, to live a life that is expansive, serene, and dignified. This vision is what enabled them to endure history's storms while keeping their inner light alive. Stoic freedom, in the end, is the ability to live unchained by fear, desire, or public opinion, guided instead by reason and virtue. When we accept what cannot be changed, focus on mastering ourselves, and see all upheavals as parts of nature, we touch the deepest liberation. This freedom needs no recognition, depends on neither wealth nor poverty, and is not shaken by glory or disgrace. It is a quiet but enduring flame, allowing us to stand firm in adversity, remain calm in chaos, and find meaning in each fleeting moment of life. This is the gift Stoicism has left humanity, a simple yet unyielding path that leads us back to ourselves, where true freedom has always been waiting, ready to be recognized and lived fully until life's final step.